1. Tim ran down the stairs 2 at a time, and as he reached the bottom, he ran in the direction of his room, passing the seemingly countless doors on either side, pushing his legs to their limit. He needed to get back to his room, the things he had seen. He needed to feel safe. Room 7, Room 8, Room 9, and then finally he reached it. Room 10. Grabbing the knob and turning it, the entrance opened, and he slipped into the room, shutting the door seconds later as quietly as he could. It didn't take him long to cross to the other side of the room, to the bed, and get into it. He positioned himself so he was facing the opposite way to the door, looking towards the window that gave a view on the courtyard of the building. He hoped she would not be here soon. The rules were that he wasn't supposed to be out of bed this late, and certainly not to be out to sneak around looking in rooms he shouldn't be. Had he been seen? No. That much he knew for certain. He had been careful, made sure the hallways were clear before he had ventured out. All he had done was gone to the toilet and come back again. That was what he was going to tell her. She would never know what he had really done. That was his excuse. He just went to the toilet. It wasn't a big deal. He was allowed, wasn't he? The rules didn't apply for that sort of thing. How could she know he had been venturing up to the 3rd floor and looked in on her office? There was nobody even there. No, it wasn't possible. But she did. She always knew. There had been others who had done exactly the same as he had done. They had broken the rules, had done it without her seeing, but she had known anyway. The punishment was given to them. He saw what had happened to them, the nightmarish things that she did to them. He didn't want the punishment. He didn't want to end up like the others. He would rather die. As he lay in the bed, he listened. Nothing was present within hearing range. There wasn't the sound of footsteps coming down the hall towards his room, no sound of the door creaking open as she came in to confront him and then take him away. Nothing. He only heard the sound of his own breathing and the eerie silence of the orphanage around him. Why had they moved him here? He thought about the question, and then he came to the answer. They didn't know about her. 2. Before this place, he had been living with his old foster parents, a couple in a small 3-bedroom house on the poor side of town. He would rather be there than here right now. Sure, they had their rules, but they were reasonable. A lot better than the previous people that he had been set up with. He wanted to be in their home, lying in the bed that they had set up for him in the spare bedroom. He would give anything to smell that sour scent of alcohol in the air, and he would give anything to be picked on by the little brat those people had given birth to. In his mind, it was a paradise compared to what he could potentially be facing in the coming hours. He had been taken away from those people because the organization that looked after him had decided that they weren't fit to look after him, weren't treating him as well as they could have. In their words, it was neglect. So they had taken him instead to an orphanage. This orphanage. It was a place called No Place Like Home. They said it was nice. A place where they looked after kids like him. He would be accepted into it, make friends. His life was going to get a lot better. And at first, it seemed like they had been telling the truth. They had driven him there. He had met some of the kids. They understood what he was going through, and they understood because he was like them. They were orphans too. He had been introduced to all the children, and even some of the adults. And then he met her. The caretaker. The beautiful young woman with auburn hair, the green eyes, and the warming smile. "You will be safe here," she said. "I will take care of you." But listen, there are 3 rules you must follow. Number 1 is don't fight with the other kids. Number 2 is always treat others like you want to be treated. And the 3rd and final rule, don't leave your room after bedtime. You got all of that, Tim? He had nodded. She seemed nice enough. She wasn't telling him he was ugly or stupid, or he would be forever alone because he had no real parents like she was used to. She wasn't telling him that they had abandoned him at birth and he would never be close to anybody. None of that. She was just a nice lady in his eyes. Just a nice lady. He couldn't have been more wrong. It had started off good. He got along with the others. Nobody bullied him or made him feel like he didn't belong there. They followed the 3 rules like they were supposed to. It was like the perfect scenario. But the one thing that Tim had started to notice over the weeks was that whenever the caretaker was around, the other kids would be extra nice. Almost like they were going out of their way to obey the rules. No one would ever speak much when she was around either. They would just look down, concentrating on what they were doing. It was almost like when she was in their presence, the socialization function would turn off in the brains of the other kids. Like they were frightened to speak. Then it happened. One rainy day after Tim had been there a month, he was playing in the main TV room of the orphanage, just minding his own business, using his imagination with the toys to make a universe of his own, when one of the new kids that had arrived days before, Sam was his name, got angry with one of the others, telling him to shut up and that's not how you play the game. After the outburst, he had thrown the board game halfway across the room and had gone and sat in the corner. Not 30 seconds later, the caretaker was in the area, standing in the entrance behind him. The words she spoke were nice, caring, understanding. No trace of anger or frustration in them at all. Sam, what happened here?
She wasn't playing the game right. She was cheating.
He didn't turn around to say this, but as he spoke, the caretaker walked into the room towards him, arms folded over her chest. Now, Sam, what did I tell you about being mean to people? It's not on here.
I don't care about your stupid rules. She was cheating.
There was a long silence, and then the caretaker sighed. Come on, you're going to have to come with me.
Why?
Because you broke the rules, Sam, and things happen to those who break the rules. If they didn't, there would be no penalty for wrongdoings. So come on. Don't worry, it will be okay. I'm just going to talk with you for a while. You're not going to get in too much trouble. Come on. Reluctantly standing up, but not taking the hand that the caretaker had put out for him, Sam followed her out of the room and down the hallway. As soon as she was gone, everybody started playing and talking again, as if nothing had ever happened. It wasn't until 2 days later that Tim saw Sam again. 3. He wasn't the same. He had been a full-on, in-your-face kind of a boy. One that didn't take no for an answer. He was one of those boys that would have no regard for the feelings of others. You could have gone so far as to use the word bully to describe him. The way he was now was totally different. He had become pale, his face not showing nearly the same amount of emotion, his eyes sunken in. He looked tired, too tired, drained almost. Nobody was talking to him, and Tim, being the kind of boy he was, wanted to make sure he was okay, even if he was a bully. Hey, Sam, what's going on? What did you and the caretaker talk about? Tim had walked up and asked him the question. There was no response at first. The boy just sat there, staring at the ground. Eventually, though, he moved his head up to face Tim and simply stared at him, straight in the eyes. This scared Tim a little, and he started to move back, But as the boy spoke, fear turned more to a concern.
I mustn't break the rules.
Those were the only words he spoke. After, he simply looked back down at the ground. Tim was worried. The boy was obviously sick, too sick to be playing outside. So he did the only thing he could think of doing. He told the caretaker. He found her walking the grounds and had run up to her, opening his mouth.
Miss, Sam is sick. I think he might need a doctor.
With a smile, the caretaker knelt down to the height of the boy, then responded, I know. Don't worry, Sam is okay. I noticed he was sick this morning, so I gave him some special medicine. He should be okay in a few days.
Are you sure?
Of course I'm sure, Tim. Now, quick. Better get to playing. You only have 10 minutes of activity time left. And so he did, trusting that the caretaker knew what she was doing. Why wouldn't she? She was an adult, after all. However, 10 minutes later, when everybody was being called inside, another boy came up to Tim. Tim didn't know his name, but that detail didn't matter. It was the question he asked that Tim found the most confusing. What did he say to you?
What?
What did he say to you? Sam, you were talking to him before. What did he say?
Nothing really. Only that he must obey the rules.
Just like the others. Just like the others? What was this kid talking about? The statement had sparked an interest in him, and he coaxed the boy for more information.
Others?
The boy looked around him then, making sure nobody was within earshot distance. Then he spoke, his voice low, almost a whisper. Whenever anybody breaks the rules, she knows.
Who knows?
The caretaker. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, she always knows if you have broken the rules. It's happened to 6 other kids since I got here. She always asks them to go with her, and then you don't see them for a while. And then they come back, and they are never the same. They hardly talk, and when you ask them anything about what happened or how they are going, they always just respond with, I mustn't break the rules.
What? The caretaker? No, she's a nice lady. She gave Sam medicine for his sickness.
I wouldn't really call it medicine. He stopped talking and looked around again, surveying who was around him for a second time. Ask Jessie about it. He turned them both around, pointing at a girl near the back of the line. She had blonde curly hair and wore a blue checkered dress. She was one of the first to be taken away by the caretaker. Nobody knows what happened. She won't talk about it. She just responds with, I mustn't break the rules. Tim went to speak, but the boy cut him off again. Trust me, you don't want to break the rules around here. And whatever you do, never go up to the top floor to her room.
What happens if I go up to her room?
You become like them. And that was all that was said. After his sentence, the boy simply walked inside along with the others, leaving Tim standing there, looking at the line of kids as they shuffled in. Not knowing what to think of the boy's words, he went through with the suggestion that had been laid out, walking next to Jessie as she passed him.
Have you ever broken the rules? Got on the caretaker's bad side?
It was a simple question, and she gave a simple answer, never looking at him while she spoke, simply going about the walking action like he wasn't even there. I mustn't break the rules. Tim didn't know what to think. He stopped walking and watched the rest of the children file into the building. What was going on? Could the caretaker really be doing this to the others? He didn't get far in the thinking, however. He was interrupted by a female voice behind him. Tim, it's time to go inside now. He turned around. The caretaker stood behind him, wearing a gentle smile. Yeah. He turned from her and walked in. 4. The rest of that afternoon, he thought about what the boy had said to him. If you break the rules, she always knows. She takes you away and you become like them.
It couldn't be true. The caretaker was a nice lady. She had never been mean to him. She always wore that smile and always had that sweet attitude. She was just trying to get everybody to follow the rules. That was all. When it was time for lights out, he decided that the boy had been lying to him, simply winding him up, trying to provoke fear in him so it would give him nightmares. That was the kind of person that boy was. He was mean. That's all there was to it. But as the weeks went on, he noticed what the boy had been saying. Anybody who broke the rules, the caretaker would be on them in a second, leading them down the hall away from the rest of the children. It was mostly the new kids that arrived that had it happen to them. It seemed that unless they showed curiosity in the people who were taken, they didn't know about the previous people, or the claim that the caretaker changed the kids. Nobody told them about it. When Tim spotted the kids who were taken after they had been put back into the group, he would go up to them, ask how they were, whether or not the talk with the caretaker went well, and every time they would give him that same response: "I mustn't break the rules." Needless to say, he was starting to suspect that he shouldn't even think about doing the wrong thing. He had tried to talk again to the boy who had first told him about the caretaker, but he was having none of it. Whenever Tim would try to get information from him, he would simply say that he didn't know what Tim was talking about and walk off, heading to another part of the orphanage building or the other side of the room, beginning to play with the other kids. Tim needed to know more of what was going on. He needed to know what was going to happen to him if he broke the rules. Of course he wasn't going to do it intentionally, but what if he did it accidentally? She had said that he wasn't allowed to leave his room after lights out. What if he needed to go to the toilet? Would she know if he simply went down the stairs to the restroom? It was innocent enough. He wasn't trying to break any rules, but he didn't know. What if she got him for something as simple as that? He needed the answers, and there was only one place he could find them. He was going to venture up to the caretaker's room. Of course, he wouldn't do it during the night, but rather during the day. That way, he wouldn't get in trouble, and he could still find out whether or not something was going on in there. It wouldn't be breaking the rules if he didn't go into the room. He would simply put his ear to the door, listen out, and if there was nothing there, he would come back down to the first floor where everybody else was. If there was something, well, he would get out of there anyway. Either way, he wasn't going to break the rules, and he didn't intend to either. He hatched the scheme for the next day. It was just after 11 a.m., the designated time that they were allowed to play. He had an hour. When nobody was looking, he made for the staircase, walking towards it casually. Once he got to it, he took each stair with caution, careful not to make too much noise. Eventually, he reached the second story, and was faced with the staircase to the third floor not too long after that. Looking both ways down the corridor, making sure nobody had followed him or was on the second floor walking around, he was about to make for the first stair to the third floor, when a voice behind him scared him half to death. 5. "What the heck are you doing, man?" It was the voice of the boy that had given him the information in the first place. "I'm going upstairs. I'm going to check out the caretaker's study, see what's really going on up there." "No, don't do that. You can't. She will know. She always does." "No, she won't, because I won't go in there. I will just listen at the door." "Don't even go up there. She might get you for just thinking about it." "Don't be silly. She can't read minds." He turned back around and started to make his way up the stairs, but the boy stopped him, grabbing him by the arm and pulling him back down. "Hey, what's your problem?" Tim said this as he was struggling in the boy's grasp, trying to break free. "Are you stupid or something?" The boy got no further in his question. A female voice from behind both of them made itself known. And what could possibly be happening here? 2 boys at the stairs to the third floor? The boy let go of Tim and faced the
the caretaker. We weren't going upstairs, miss, honest. We were just here, talking, that's all. There was a silence before she answered, a curious expression crossing her young features as she dropped down to their level of height. Alistair Jones, you wouldn't be lying to me now, would you? You know that's against the rules, and if you've broken the rules, well, you know what comes next. The look of fear on Alistair's face at this point was the face of a boy in despair. I'm not lying, miss. Promise. She smiled and looked at both of them, hovering her gaze on each of them in turn. When finally she spoke again, the words were aimed at Tim. Tim, I know you would never lie to me. No, miss, I wouldn't. He too now felt the fear start to rise in him. So, is it true you boys were just standing here talking, or were you planning to go up to the 3rd floor? We were just standing here talking, miss. We were talking about how cold it is outside today. How cold it is outside today, After her words, there was an eerie silence. The two of them were waiting for her to make her decision. Would she punish them, or would she simply believe what they were telling her? Eventually, she sighed and stood back up. Well, if you two want to talk, it's best to do it in the playroom. We can't have you kids getting lost now, can we? No, miss. The two of them said this together. Well, run along then. She started to walk away down the hall, and the two of them headed for the stairs back down to the 1st floor. When they were out of earshot of the caretaker, Alistair spoke up again. Do not go to that room. You will regret it. Why? He didn't answer the question, but simply walked back down the stairs and into the room where the other children were, leaving Tim to watch after him. He knew he shouldn't even be thinking about it. He should be acting like the other kids, playing as he normally would. But his curiosity was getting the better of him. He started to hatch a scheme inside his mind. He would get up to investigate the room in the early hours of the morning. That way, if he did run into somebody, he could say that he was just going to the toilet. He had gotten lost on the way back to his room. This would work on the other adults, and if he played his cards right, the caretaker. He was good at conversation when he was talking to her. This much he knew to be true, and it seemed that she trusted him. After all, she had caught him out in the past and had seemed to trust that he was doing the right thing. It was decided. He would check out the room the following morning. 6. Night fell upon the orphanage as the hours ticked by. 4, 5, 6, 7. Soon, it was 9 o'clock at night, and the caretaker was going round to the rooms, saying good night to the kids and switching their lights off. By the time she got to Tim's room, he was already tucked into the bed, and she turned the light off. He pretended to shut his eyes and try to get to sleep. As she closed the door, however, he opened his eyes again and sat up in the bed. If he was going to keep himself awake until 6 a.m., he would need some help. That afternoon, when the group of kids had been told to pack up the toys, he had taken a Game Boy, hiding it in his pocket. It was one of the old ones, a Game Boy Color, but he wasn't concerned with the model. All he needed was a screen, and it did its job perfectly. By the time 6 a.m. rolled around, he had beaten the game he was playing multiple times over, but it had kept him awake, and that was all he needed it for. Carefully and quietly, he climbed out of his bed and walked to the door. He only pushed it open slightly at first, wanting to observe the hall to make sure nobody was passing through. Nothing moved. He continued pushing until he was out in the hallway, then gently closed it behind him. Taking a deep breath, he started to walk forward, slowly, making sure his feet didn't make too much sound on the black and white checkerboard surface. Before he knew it, he was standing at the base of the stairs leading to the 3rd floor. Without hesitation, he started to climb them one at a time. He was lucky they were carpeted. He didn't have to be too careful with the noise they would make when he walked on them.
Reaching the top of the stairs, he saw that the caretaker's office wasn't too far away, just at the end of the hallway. Suddenly, fear hit him like a ton of bricks. He swallowed. He wasn't supposed to be here. He should be in bed. No, he couldn't think like that. He came here to find out what was going on, and he was going to do just that. He stopped the thoughts before they got too far out of control. He started towards the room, tiptoeing now, listening out for anybody that could come by at any moment and spot him. Nothing happened, however, and by the time he reached the door, the fear inside him had lessened some. Although he was hesitant at first, deciding whether or not he should go through with what he was about to do, eventually he pushed himself forward and pressed his ear against the door. He didn't know what to expect. Screaming, tools being used, machine sounds, giggles. But he heard nothing. It was like the room was empty. Either he was right in his thinking, or nothing was happening in it right now. Or maybe it was simply just a normal office. Maybe Alistair has been lying this whole time, just to freak me out. It's all a game to him. Tim thought about this as he stood there, straining his ears. Alistair could have set the whole thing up, designed it so whenever he had asked one of the other kids that had got in trouble about what the caretaker had done, they responded with the words, "I mustn't break the rules." He seemed like the kind of guy that would do something like that. After all, he was pretty popular, and he had gone out of his way to act like he didn't know what Tim was talking about, withholding the information from him about the caretaker, making sure the fear built up inside Tim to the point where he had broken the rules to find out what it was all about. That was it. He wanted Tim to get in trouble with the caretaker. Alistair knew that Tim was not a rule breaker. He got along well with the adults here, and they treated him nicely. He was jealous. A sting of anger hit Tim. This had been Alistair's plan all along, to trick Tim into breaking the rules. Well, Tim would show him. He would show him that he had the guts to stare the broken rules right in the face and not get caught for it. With a heart filled with confidence, he stepped away from the door, extended his hand, and grabbed the knob. With a twist of the handle and a hard push, the door swung inward. It was then that he wished he had never come up the stairs. He wished he was in his room asleep and dreaming. He even wished that he was back home with his previous foster parents. Wished he was talking with the brat daughter. Anywhere but the position he was in would have been the best place in the world. What he saw before him could only be described as horror. 7. The place was nothing like an office, but rather more along the lines of something from the movie Alien. It looked like a nest of some sort. Strands of clear goo covered everything in a protective layer of silky web-like material. There was no desk or other items you would usually find in an office. Instead, large moving shapes of reddish-like flesh clung to the walls and ceiling. The floor was covered in a white foam, and bugs of all shapes and sizes darted across it as Tim opened the door. It was like a nightmare, and the longer he stood there, the more he thought that he must be dreaming. Then, all of a sudden, he heard a cry. Looking over in the direction where it came from, his eyes widened in horror at what he saw. The shape of a hand, seeming as though it was trying to push its way out of one of the reddish flesh things located on the wall. And that was when he realized with horror that the things on the walls weren't a replacement for the plaster. They were eggs. Eggs that contained the victims of those that did wrong. the caretaker was harvesting them, breeding something from that which she took from the kids, those that broke the rules. He didn't know what to think, but he knew that whatever demonic operation that the caretaker, if he could even call her that anymore, had going on here, it was nothing but bad news. He needed to warn the other kids about this, but he couldn't do it right now. He would have to wait until playtime that morning. He started to back away from the door, beginning to close it, when a sound echoed out across the hallway. He stopped in his tracks, looking around for anybody. A few seconds passed by. Then all at once, fear gripped Tim. It wrapped around him, feeling as though it was some kind of symbiotic alien life taking over him, paralyzing him one muscle at a time. He needed to break free of this. He needed to get out of there. If the caretaker knew he was here, what he had seen. He turned in the direction of the stairs and sprinted back down the hallway and down the stairs 2 at a time, back to room 10. Once he was inside the room, he jumped back to the bed and hid under the covers, hoping the caretaker would not know he had done what he had done. And that is where he is laying right now, his eyes tight shut, and his mind focused on nothing but the begging to whoever was listening. He knew he was going to get in trouble. There was no doubt about it. She knew, she always knew. And she was going to get there soon, take him away back to that office, put him in one of those eggs. She would change him, make him like the others. Whenever anybody would ask him if he got in trouble with the caretaker, he would simply answer, "I mustn't break the rules." But the longer he lay there, the longer he didn't hear any footsteps. He had expected them to come no more than a few minutes after he had jumped into the bed, and had been dreading that moment. But it seemed to never come. He simply lay there in complete silence, and when at last he couldn't hold his eyelids open anymore, he had one last thought that echoed through his mind and into his dreams. "I hope she doesn't save it until the morning." That morning, his dreams were littered with the images of the caretaker's office. He had a nightmare that he was stuck in one of those eggs, and the caretaker was watching over him, no longer a human being, but something with 8 legs and red eyes. It didn't speak, just simply laughed at him as his soul was removed from his body, and the black tendrils of death curled around him, suffocating him. And in that moment, he knew what hell was like. All the tales through the centuries about Satan, fire, it was all true. His soul would be forever buried below the earth, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. I mustn't break the rules. 8. As the time struck 11 and the kids filed into the television room, Tim looked on at them all. He knew he had been like them once, eager to play, eager to make friends. He would talk to them, laugh with them, draw pictures, watch the television. But what was he now? He knew the truth behind it all. The truth that the orphanage was a hideout, a nest for some entity that called herself the Caretaker, a demon. Where had the actual caretaker gone? Had this thing harvested her soul and taken on her form? He supposed he would never know those answers, but the ones that were most important for the others, he did know. He wanted to tell them, to shout at them to get out of there. They were in danger. He wanted to let the other adults know, to show them the room, but he didn't know if he could. He didn't know how to. "Hello, Tim. How are we today?" The all too familiar sound of the caretaker behind him. "Not too bad, miss." He turned around and spoke to her. "Well, that's good. Why are you standing here for, though? Go and play with the others." "Yes, miss." He smiled as he said this, and she smiled back, walking off down the hall. He had started walking towards the rest of the kids when Alistair came up to him. "Okay, listen, I've decided I'm in. We will sneak up to the caretaker's office tonight. I'll keep a lookout while you check it out. I know it's risky, but you're right. We need to know what's going on up there. Who knows what she may be doing to the other kids?" As he finished talking, Tim slowly turned towards him, opened his mouth, and said his next words slowly and calmly. "I mustn't break the rules."